And we're off. Hello, everybody. Okay, so we're live. We'll start with a prayer, and then we will jump right into Psalms 45. We're going to get to 50 today, and we'll go from there. I missed you all. I hope you had a wonderful holiday break, and let's get started. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, shine within our hearts, loving mass, pure light of divine knowledge, and open the eyes of our minds to the understanding of the gospel teachings, and instill within us also reverence for blessed commandments, that having trampled upon carnal desires, we may enter into a spiritual way of living, both thinking and doing only those things that are well-pleasing to you. For you, Christ, our God, our sanctification and the nation, we give glory together to Father, without beating all who give life, giving spirit, now and forever in the age of ages. Amen. Oh, hello, everybody. So we had a little bit of a longer break. We had Christmas, and then we had, then I was gone after New Year's. I was gone to Durham for my last residency class. So it's one of those bittersweet things where I really like my classmates, so I'm sad I'm not going to get to see them anymore. But then I'm really, really happy I don't have to go and do all that. So that is done. Next week, are we doing it next week? I'll have to check. But the next class we have, which I'm assuming is next week because I don't think I have anything going on, we're going to do Psalm 51, and that's the psalm that's attributed to David after Nathan kind of pointed out that he was not being so nice with Bathsheba. That's what I'm writing my thesis on. So we'll spend some time on that. I think we're just going to only do that one psalm next week and talk about it. It's heavily used liturgically. It's used during all the confession, the services of confession. It's also used every single liturgy. The priest says as he's sensing before the great entrance. And my advisor thought that was really interesting. She said, wait, that's why you're doing this thesis. You need to focus on that. I was going to do something else. She goes, no, I want you to stick with that. So we'll see. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it. But that psalm in and of itself is just it's a beautiful psalm, but it's also fairly complex. We can talk about some things and how it's been misused in history and that kind of stuff. But for today, we are on Psalm 45, and Psalm 45 is a wedding hymn. Dun, 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 dun. Nobody gets my dad jokes. My kids don't even get my dad jokes. So if you have your Bibles, open them to Psalm 45. And one of the things I did because I'm doing this Bible study is I'm trying to pray the Psalter more. So the Orthodox Church has the Psalms broken into, or their settings is the actual word in English, but it's kathisma in Greek. And so the kathismata, when you do matins, if you ever get there for Orthros early before the service, and there's a whole set of hymns that are sung, there's a kathismata, and there's three of them. And there's three of them, or three sets of them, because there are three settings to each of the kathisma. So stasis, there's verses, I guess. And they usually have 2 to 3 psalms in them. But anyway, the whole week's broken up. The psalm's broken up. So if you read the two kathisma that are in the morning and then the one kathisma that's in the evening for Vespers, you'll read the entire psalms every week. And so I started trying to pray the kathismata. I'm pretty good in the mornings because I just get up early to do it. And then in the evenings, and this is why I'm telling the story, in the evenings while the kids are brushing their teeth, I just go in our icon corner and I start just reading the Psalms. Well, Zach came over to me one time. He's like, wait, I can not go to bed for a few minutes if I sit with you and read. So he comes over and he reads the Psalms with me. But he's like, Dad, what are psalms? They're psalms. But that is a practice that I would absolutely recommend to people. Maybe start off and just do one stasis at a time instead of trying to do the full kathismata, like read 2 or 3 psalms as opposed to 9 of them. And don't try to get through it according to the schedule. But the thing about the Psalms, and we're going to notice this as we go through them today again, and we've been talking about, the thing about the Psalms is that they are less intellectual argument and more a guide to prayer and a reminder in our prayer to recognize. I mean, there's theology in the Psalms. I'm not saying there's not, but just the way that they are presented, they typically speak more to your heart than to your brain, if that makes any sense. And that's something that's sorely needed in our culture because we're so intellectual and so cerebral. We need to talk from our hearts. I had to do for my class, I had to do one of the strengths inventories, the Clifton Strengths Finder or whatever. There's 34 traits. You do a little test and it pops up. My number 1 was intellection. So you like to think. I'm like, oh, great. That's exactly what I want. But it was interesting. It was Intellection, strategic. So I tend to think of strange ways to get around a problem. Input, I like to learn stuff. Belief, which I'm like, doesn't everybody in here have belief? Like we're pastors. That should be like one of our big things. And then the last one was connectedness. So I see everything as connected, which makes sense too. But anyhow, let's jump in and we'll see. I mean, I always say that there's not a lot to the Psalms this week, and then we end up going over by 5 or 10 minutes. But I think we'll get done a little bit early today, just because these Psalms really 45 through 47 are. So remember, you go back to Psalm 1, it talks about the righteous and the wicked. And in Psalm 2, it talks about Israel and the nations. And those two tensions, those two dichotomies are kind of present all through Scripture. We've mostly been talking about the righteous and the wicked. That's just, there seems to be more Psalms about that. But 45 through 47 are about Israel and the nations. So we kind of slip into that. So keep that in the back of your mind as we do this. So this first one, 45, is it's considered a royal psalm, but it is a wedding psalm. So it's basically a hymn at a wedding. Now, what's interesting about it is the question is, who is the voice of the narrator? Is it the bride or is it the scribe who's writing the poetry? Which becomes very interesting. Uh-oh, Marina's trying to get on. I don't know. What is a Bible study link? Dun, 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 dun. Didn't I send it out?
Yeah, you did.
Let me see if it came across. Can you send it to Marina? Can you forward it to her or copy it?
I just copied it.
Okay. Because I think it's going to take me too long to get to it and people can get bored. Sorry, guys. Somebody's trying to log on and I guess they don't have the link. So the question is whether this is the actual poet who composed it and is saying, oh, look at what a great poet I am, and speaking in the third person about the bride, or is this actually the bride narrating? And you can really read it both ways. I don't think it changes it that much, though. But the idea behind this is that, there's something on my screen. The idea behind this is that there is a foreign bride is brought to the king and or to the prince, I guess, and promised in marriage. And so this is kind of their wedding day where she's coming before him. And the first part of the psalm is basically narrating or describing her first encounter with the king. And then she gets some advice, and then some commentators said it's the groom replying back to her, or it could be the scribe, the poet coming back in, and it's the voice of the narrator again. It's not super clear, and there's no really way to find out and say, oh, this is actually what it is. But different people read it differently. But my heart overflows with a goodly theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. So this is unusual in the Psalms, is it's actually self-reflective. It's saying, I'm going to write a really good psalm. So my tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. Now, he's either writing this to the king while he's reflecting on it, or these are the words in the mouth of the bride. I think it's kind of nice to imagine the bride being brought in with her big train and all of her attendants and everything, and the king's there, and she's been practicing, for weeks. What am I going to say before him? But you are, and it's typical royal flattery. You are the fairest of the sons of men. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore, God has blessed you forever. Gird your sword upon your thigh, O mighty one, in your glory and majesty. And your majesty ride forth victoriously for the cause of truth and to defend the right. Let your right hand teach you dread deeds. Your arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. The peoples fall under you. So he's shown as a mighty, powerful, warrior who goes forth and defends his people. Now, what's interesting about this is that those are verses that I pray when I'm getting vested for liturgy. So there's the epigonation, which means literally the thing that hangs on my knee. But when you have an office, and so I'm a pneumatikos, I'm a spiritual father, so that's my office. So I wear the epigonation, and it sits right over your knee, but it's that diamond shaped thing that goes like that. When I put that on, and it represents the sword that aristocracy would wear during the Byzantine Empire. They would always have the sword. That was a sign of their status. So now it's just a little fabric kind of sword. But that's my sword. And that's what this is the verses. When I put it on, I say, gird your sword in your thigh, Almighty One, in your splendor and your beauty, not booty, your splendor and your beauty. Stretch forth your bowstring and go out to prevail in the cause of truth, gentleness, and justice. Which is really interesting. because what it's doing is it's taking this martial imagery and putting it at the service of truth, gentleness, and justice, which I think is very interesting. And of course, that's what we do as priests. Your divine throne endures forever and ever. Your royal scepter is a scepter of equity. You love righteousness and hate wickedness. There's that from Psalm 1, wicked and righteous. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. Your robes are all fragrant with myrrh and aloes and cassia. From ivory palaces, stringed instruments make you glad. Daughters of kings are among your ladies of honor, and in your right hand stands the queen in gold of Ophir. So, and that's actually what we say when we're doing the proskomidi, when we put the particle for Panayia next to the lamb that's going to be Christ, and we say, at your rights to the queen, clothed in an embroidered mantle of gold, which is right from this, these verses. Now, one strange thing is in verse 6, your divine throne endures forever and ever. There is some confusion over that in the manuscript tradition. So it either means your divine throne endures forever and ever, or it means your throne, O God, endures forever and ever, which is strange because it doesn't really fit there. Nobody's addressing God, so it would be a little strange insertion. What that's done, though, is it has made people think of this as a messianic psalm, that shifting voice between king and God and king is something that you would do when you're talking about the Messiah, but it wouldn't have been understood in Old Testament. So I don't know. It's interesting. That's one of those. There's little things in there that would be kind of cool if that was the way it was, but we don't know if it was or not. And it doesn't really change the overall meaning of the psalm. But so the queen of Ophir. Now, one of the commentators said this is actually now that the queen is now addressing the new bride. So kind of like the queen mother is giving her advice on how to survive in the court. And "O daughter" is kind of, it's not necessarily saying this is her mother speaking to her. It's just something saying like, metaphorically, "O daughter. Hear, O daughter, consider and incline your ear. Forget your people and your father's house, and the king will desire your beauty." You heard that before?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's in Practices, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the king will desire you beauty. Since he is your Lord, bow to him. The people of Tyre will sue your favor with gifts, the richest of the people with all kinds of wealth. And again, this is setting up this kind of, we don't like thinking of marriage in these terms, but you're beautiful. The God, the king will desire your beauty, and he will be your master because you will then come into his household. The princess is decked in her chamber with gold woven robes, and many-colored robes she is led to the king. With her virgin companions, her escort, and her train. With joy and gladness they are led along as they enter the palaces of the king. And that's talking about this kind of wedding procession. One of the commentators is just going on and on and be like, this is about the wedding chamber, and this whole thing is just dripping with sex and politics and intrigue. And I'm kind of going, it's in the background, but I'm not sure that that's exactly what we're going for with the psalm. But it's strange what people will want to find in there. Now, this last part's interesting because is it the bride's advisor? Is it the groom? Is it the narrator? It doesn't really change the meaning dramatically, but it's kind of interesting. Instead of your fathers shall be your sons. So she's had to leave her household, so her fathers, her ancestors are gone, but now her progeny, her sons will be in the place of her fathers. You will make them princes in all the earth. I will cause your name to be celebrated in all generations. Therefore, the peoples will praise you forever and ever. I kind of like that being from the groom personally. He's like, look, I'm glad you came. You left your family. It must be really terrible and everything else like that. But your children, you're going to have princes. They're going to rule over the earth. And so people will praise your name forever and ever. So that psalm is kind of the psalm asking, is God God of the nations? Because you're bringing a foreign bride in. So you're kind of combining Israel with the nations. So that's kind of, keep that in the back of your mind. This is God of the nations. Psalm 46. To the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, a song. I'm going to read it from Robert Alter's translation. By the way, I didn't realize this. He has a translation of 1 and 2 Samuel, and he has a translation, I think, Genesis. He's got a bunch of things. Yeah, he's done a lot of bits and pieces, but they're good. God is a shelter and strength for us, a help in straits readily found. Therefore we fear not when the earth breaks apart, when mountains collapse into the heart of the seas. Its waters roar and royal mountains heave in its surge. A stream, its rivulets gladden God's town, the holy dwelling of Elia. God in its midst, it will not collapse. God helps it as morning breaks. Nations roar and kingdoms collapse. He sends forth his voice and earth melts. The Lord of armies is with us, a fortress for us, Jacob's God. Go, behold the acts of the Lord, who made desolations on earth, caused wars to cease to the end of the earth. The bow he has broken and splintered, the spear and chariots burned in fire. Let go and know that I am God. I loom among nations, I loom upon earth. The Lord of armies is with us, a fortress, Jacob's God. So that's claiming God as the God of Israel, right? And it's very interesting. So this is the first of the songs of Zion. And these are actually, I thought these were kind of scholarly reconstructions. These talk about Jerusalem, or they talk about the city on the hill, so these must be songs of Jerusalem. What's really interesting is if you go in Psalm 137, is it? Hold on a second. It's the really depressing one, which is, Psalm 137. It's when the Babylonians are taking them captive, and they say, there by the river we wept, and they asked us to sing songs of Zion. They asked us to hang our, but we hung up our harps on the trees. When we read the next one, when we read Psalm 48, keep that in mind. But singing the songs of Zion, they were asking him to sing these church hymns after they just burned down the temple. And they're about going up to the temple and how glorious God is and all this other stuff. So it's pretty brutal, I think. But the
mockery there, that's the sing, I guess.
Well, Psalm 137, they are mocking, and that's why they can't sing, because they're defeated. Okay, so 46, the first song of Zion. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Now I'm reading the other translation. Therefore we will not fear the earth, though the earth should change. The mountains shake in the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble with its tumult. Now this is interesting because there's a pause there. What's really interesting about this, and I didn't catch it because the translation shifts it around, but when you go down, look at verse 6. The nations rage and the kingdoms totter. Okay? The word for rage and roar is the same, and the word for tremble and totter is the same. So some say, oh, well, it's a shift. It's actually, those are tied very tightly together. So they're basically saying, look, if the earth is to shudder or the seas roar, we don't worry because God's got control of it. They're not, they're just making noise. Why do we get upset when the nations start to make noise? God's got that too. And the whole thing, of course, is about God being in control. Now, this is really important because what we're going to see in the, is it the next one? I know it's 48. That is it? I don't know. I've been reading all of them all day long, so I can't remember. But it's claiming that Israel's victories weren't Israel's victories, that Israel's victories were God's victories. And so if they forget that they were God's victories, then that's when they go astray. So it's this constant reminder. And one of the commentaries I thought was really interesting. It's a really good point. He said, look, if you defeat another nation, he was talking about the northern tribes, Dan and I forget which ones they were. Dan was one of them. That they did not drive out all of the pagans from their midst, so they left some of the Canaanites there, and it caused problems later on. That's where a lot of Israel's problems came from. But he said that when you defeat an enemy within a number of generations, you tend to forget that if you don't constantly remind people. So the same thing, if God defeated their enemies on their behalf, there has to be a constant reminder, else they would forget and they would just go back to doing their own thing. So these songs of Zion, are a reminder that what we have, and by the way, it would be a great thing for us to remember in our own country, that what we have is not of our own making. This was gifted to us. I mean, ultimately, all of creation is gifted to us, which we'll get to in a minute as well. But more importantly, Israel's status and identity is based on God's victory and God's gift to them, and they're at danger of forgetting it. There's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. So we're talking about Jerusalem. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her right early. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. Some people say it shifts right here. I don't think it shifts because those words tie it so tightly together. And they're saying exactly what I'm saying is even when everything starts going crazy in the world, we don't worry about it in the natural world because God's got that. If the nations rage, the kingdoms start to totter. God utters his voice and the earth melts. The God of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. So it's trusting in God's providence. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has wrought desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. So all this martial imagery, but he ends up saying God makes wars go away because wars are bad. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. And then this, everybody knows, be still and know that I am God. Yeah. I am exalted among the nations. I'm exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. That's repeated. So that word for be still is actually to loosen your grasp. And this is a really good, checking the time. This is a really good thing for us to keep in mind because he's not saying, just sit there and do nothing. What he's saying is, you think about it in a military sense. All these guys have their spears and their swords, and they're like, we're going to go defend this, and we're going to go take the town. And God's saying, no, I got this. You guys just, worship me. You trust in me, and I'm going to take care of this. So loosen your grasp on all those things you think are helping you to control the world. That's what be still and know that I'm God is. It's saying, it really is about trust. It's saying, look, I've got this. You loosen your grasp. Stop trying to be in control of this. Stop trying to make this happen. Know that I am God. So it really is almost a surrender in saying, God's saying, you don't have to drive history. I've got this. You just relax. The God of Jacob, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. That's a good reminder for us, because I think a lot of people say, oh, be still and know that I'm God. And they think, oh, I'm supposed to just sit back and not do anything. But it really is about trusting in God and just recognizing you don't have. And this isn't just in warfare. It's not just with weapons and spears and swords and, guns and bombs and drones and whatever else. But this is about recognizing that and this is one of the things we talk about in my doctoral program a lot because kind of progressive mainline Protestants tend to focus on social justice as the gospel. We have to make the world a better place. We have to be more hospitable to the other, and we have to have more equity and everything else. And I'm not saying none of that stuff is important, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is that there's a new kingdom that's going to overturn everything and then make all things new and everything else. But so as Orthodox, we don't really worry about making a better world because this world's going to pass away and Christ is going to establish his kingdom. We're not supposed to be making a better world. We're supposed to be declaring and proclaiming his coming kingdom. But this idea of trying to make a better world, every totalitarian regime in the history of the world has come about as an effort to make a better world, to restructure the world in something that's, better. And then of course it gets corrupted, and we forget that, we forget that some of the greatest atheistic, listen, even Hitler, who everybody likes to use as their, big bad bogeyman, he's the worst there's ever been. He thought he was making the world a better place. He was trying to cleanse the races and make it, the Third Reich or whatever, the great Aryan peoples. He was doing that in the name of progress. Violence is the only recourse when you take responsibility for history. You have to force other people to do what you want. God's saying, you're not responsible for history. I'm responsible for history, and I've already taken care of it. It happened a couple thousand years ago outside of Jerusalem. So that whole thing is done. So this be still and know that I'm God is this idea that you trust in me and you let go of the control that you think you have. None of us have control. We all think we have control. We're not in control of anything. That's where our anxiety comes from. And I think that's why our nation, or at least in the modern American cultural context, anxiety is such a debilitating epidemic because we think we can control everything. Our kids will never get hurt. The whole bubble wrap thing. They're going to get hurt. Psalm 47. Okay, so is God the God of the nations? That's Psalm 45. Is God the God of Israel? That's Psalm 46. right? The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge, the God of Israel. And then we get to Psalm 47. It's this is even now, I believe, it's still read in Jewish faith at the New Year's. It's a New Year's psalm, and it's probably it's speculated that this was kind of a coronation psalm, and the idea was that they would every new year they would crown God the King of Israel in this kind of ritual coronation. The problem is that there's no record of such a ritual. There's no record that anything like that ever happened. But so it's kind of speculation. But this is seen as a kind of a New Year psalm, recommitting to God as King. Clap your hands, all peoples, shout to God with loud songs of joy, for the Lord the Most High is terrible, a great King over all the earth. He subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our heritage for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. So who is he? King of Israel, King of the nations?
King of the nations.
King of Israel there, right?
King overall.
Yeah, great King over all the earth. He subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our heritage for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. So it's pressing towards he's the king of Israel, because he subdued all those people under their feet, right?
Right.
But you're heading in the right direction, because then look what happens. God's gone out with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. By the way, that's what I say when I pick up the gifts before the great entrance, right? When I go in and I pick them up, you guys never hear it because they're singing the true hymn. But I say, God has gone out with a shout, the Lord with the sound of the trumpet. Sing praises to God, sing praises to our King, sing praises for God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm. So now you're kind of wrapping him in. King of Israel and King of the nations. He's both and. God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne, but here's the key piece. All these others are just typical imagery. He sits on his throne. He reigns on his throne. He's the king of everything. The princes of the peoples gather as the people of the God of Abraham. Right?
Yeah.
So who's the people of the God of Abraham?
I won't say everybody.
Well, no, it's the Jews.
Israel. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the people of the God of Abraham, that's Israel. But the princes of the peoples gather as the people of the God of Abraham. So this is an invitation. This is in the Psalm, and it's rather striking in the Old Testament, of the nations being invited into that Abrahamic covenant. For the shields of the earth belong to God. He is highly exalted. For the defenders of the earth, it's not really shields, the defenders, those who defend the earth belong to God, for he is highly exalted. That's a little interesting. They just it's just slipped right in there. Just like, they don't dwell on it. Just the princes of the people gather as the people of the God of Abraham.
Isn't it like a foreshadowing of Christ and then everybody reading about, including the Gentiles? No, that's reading in too much.
I mean, it is reading in too much, but that's exactly where it's going. That's what it references, but there's no way they would have had all that in mind, obviously. So it would have been the act of the inspiration there. But to say the princes of the peoples gather as the people of the God of Israel is really quite striking, because what they're saying is this is not an ethnic boundary. This is a faith boundary.
Right.
So if you share the faith, you become part of the peoples of Abraham. And I'm sure it would have been parsed out differently for a Jew than it would be for Christians now with Christ. We're speeding along. We're going to get done early. Psalm 48. So this is the one I said, think about Psalm 137. So I'm going to go to 137 so we have time. And I am going to read you the appropriate. This is one of the saddest Psalms, by the way. Every time I read it, I feel sad. So this is the psalm is about when they've been when Jerusalem's been flattened and everybody's taken away in exile to Babylon, and they're leading the captives out of Judea, and Israel's gone. And there's no more. The kingdom's gone. It's completely wiped out. And they're taking all the exiles to Babylon. By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows, there we hung up our lyres, for there our captors required of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. Right?
Right.
So one of the songs of Zion. This is what they were saying. Sing this song now, which is deeply mocking. Because there's, I mean, we will hear it in the psalm. It's like about how powerful God is, and he'll defend the nation, and he'll uphold them, and he'll never forget them, and he'll never give them away. And now these Babylonians who just burned their temple to the ground are saying, hey, sing us that catchy tune, you know. And because they were so pained and humiliated, they hung up their lyres and just left them. They just gave up on singing. I mean, I think about that's such a beautiful image of despondency. Not that despondency is beautiful, but it's just such an evocative image. It's just like, forget it. I don't care. Everything I loved, I just cast it aside. I'm just done. I'm just done. And here's the Song of Zion. So imagine that in the back of your mind during the exile. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. I think Alter says the town of our God, which sounds a little awkward. Yeah. In our God's town, his holy mountain, because Jerusalem wasn't a big old city. It was a backwire. It was a provincial capital. It was not like a big urban center. Even today, it's a big city, but it's not Tel Aviv, right? It's not London. It's not New York. But great is the Lord and highly praised in our God's town, his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great king. Does yours say far north, or does it say Zaphon? Mount Zion.
On the sides of the north. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the north. So Zaphon was the mountain where Baal ruled from. It was like the royal in Canaanite mythology. Okay. So they're actually, I mean, he's talking about that mountain Zaphon, which is in the far north. And so people say, oh, it's the north. But Mount Zion in the far north, and in Zaphon, the city of the great king, within her citadels, God has shown himself a sure defense. Imagine somebody asking you to sing this after they just wiped it out. But it's all brick and mortar. One of the commentators was going on, brick and mortar. But it is. This is a very embodied physical psalm. It's not that God is metaphorically over. It's like, no, God is in the very rocks of this place. God is in the fortifications of this place. God made the walls and the battlements and the towers and everything else. For lo, the kings assembled, they came on together. These were coming in to attack Israel. So the kings assembled, they came on together. As soon as they saw it, they were astounded. They were in panic and they took to flight. Trembling took hold of them, their anguish as of a woman in travail. They started waddling around like pregnant women. It's not nice. By the east wind thou didst shatter the ships of Tarshish, as we have heard, so have we seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, which God establishes forever. So the armies come up and they're so intimidated by the battlements and the towers, they turn and run. You know, they just run away. They come across the ocean in ships, but an east wind comes. East wind comes out of the desert. Nothing ever good comes blowing out of the desert. It's always storms and catastrophes and everything else. So this, the east wind coming in is going to do terrible things to ships that are out at sea. But God defends them. We have thought on thy steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple. As your name, O God, so your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with victory. It's actually justice. I don't know why it got translated as victory.
Righteousness.
Righteousness?
Yeah.
Yeah, the right hand is filled with righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. So justice and judgments tend to go together. Righteousness and judgments tend to go together when we're talking about God. But what's operative? What's the first thing they think about when they think about God in the temple?
Loving kindness.
Your steadfast love, chesed. As your name, O God, so your praise reaches the end of the earth. The right hand is filled with victory that might not make glad. So this righteousness, this justice. Walk about Zion, go round about her. Number her towers. Now we're back to the brick and mortar. Number her towers, count them. Consider well her ramparts and go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God. Our God forever and ever. He will be our guide forever. So what's the danger in building a giant city that can defend, that can withstand sieges?
You tend to forget about God.
Yeah.
It's self-reliant.
Yeah, we did this. Look at us. We don't need anything. And they don't. That's why when people talk about wealth, and they talk about how hard it's for rich people to get saved, mostly because that one in the idea and everything. One of the points that was brought up to me that I think is really insightful is you can't go to a extremely wealthy person and say you need God, because they don't. They can provide anything they want. They can get entertainment. They've got food. They've got security. I mean, what do they need? They don't need God for anything, at least in this world.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's actually Psalm 48. Or Psalm 49. We're gonna hear the same things. Like, oh, rich people, big deal. They're gonna die too. They don't need anything in this world. They don't need God in this life, but they sure need Him when death comes a knocking. Right. And there was some speculation that this psalm was a pilgrimage song. When people would come to Jerusalem, they would sing this song, this psalm, as they went up. And again, it's not the brick and mortar that are protecting them. It's God and God's covenant that's protecting them. That's that steadfast love is talking about covenantal obligation. We have thought on your covenant faithfulness. So the defense of our city isn't in the ramparts and the towers and everything else. It's in God. So it's making sure that we recognize that and see that. Whew. I'm tired. I've been up since 5, so I'm a little bit exhausted. I'm sorry if there's not a lot of high energy coming out of me tonight. I'll do my best. 49. So now this one is actually read at Jewish wakes even today. It's a meditation on death, but it's very unusual within the Psalms. As a matter of fact, it's unique within the Psalms. And it's thought that it's a very old psalm, that it's been around a really long time. It's what they call a wisdom psalm. So it's to teach us something. It's didactic. It's trying to help us understand something. But it sounds an awful lot like Ecclesiastes when you read it. It's kind of depressing. It's like everything's going to just be terrible. It's also a really good answer to a possible perceived moralism in Psalm 1. Psalm 1 saying, hey, if you do good things, everything's going to work out just great. He's like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit, and all that he does, he prospers. The way of the righteous, the Lord knows the way of the righteous. Everything's going to be great. If you're righteous, everything's going to be okay. And then you come to Psalm 49, and they're like, yeah, not so much. Not all the time. Even the righteous suffer too. But the point is everybody's going to die. Why is that a good thing? Yeah. That it's what comes after that is important. So, Psalm 49. Hear this, all peoples. Now, it's hard. You have to be careful reading this. We don't read it that carefully anyway. We're doing Bible study, or we're not doing Bible study. Hear this, all peoples. Well, that's just coming on the tail of 3 Psalms that we're talking about Israel and the nations. So there's this sense that when you say, hear this, all peoples, you're about to say something fairly nationalistic. Not in like the Nazi form of nationalistic, but you're going to say something, oh, you peoples, here's something about us that you don't know. But that is not the sense here at all. It's hear this, all peoples. It is an inclusive, universal claim. It's saying everybody needs to hear this. Hear this, everyone. You guys need to reflect on this because it matters. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Okay, so they're basically saying here, I'm going to teach you wisdom because I'm going to give you a riddle. And if you can figure the riddle out, then you'll understand wisdom. And the next thing is kind of the thematic question, but it's not really the riddle. The riddle comes up in verse 12 and it's repeated again in verse 20. And some people even think it got skipped after verse, one of the other verses, I can't remember. But they thought it should have been in 3 places, but it doesn't matter. So I'm going to give you a riddle to solve, and if you solve it, then you're going to have wisdom and knowledge. Then the thematic question, why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of my persecutors surrounds me? So this isn't kind of, the sentimental kind of fear. This is the kind of like a deep-seated anxiety that just leaves you unsettled all the time. Why should I feel deeply anxious and unsettled in times of trouble when the iniquity of my persecutors surrounds me? So now everybody's around me and they're making my life miserable and it's all out of my control. And, and this guy's coming and saying, why be afraid? Why worry about it? Men who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. So, here's these people that have all this money. The rich people have all the luck. I've got nothing. Everything would be better if I could afford this. And, that whole story that most of us have running in our heads. Truly, no man can ransom himself or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of his life is costly and can never suffice, that he should continue to live on forever and never see the pit. Right? I don't care how rich you are, you can't ransom your life. Nobody's got enough money to do that. There's no way to, the ransom of his life is costly and can never suffice. You're never going to have enough to pay for it. But that word ransom, see how he hits it over, like, back.
Yeah.
It's going to come up later, and it's going to be important. So nobody can ransom up his life. Nobody's got enough money. It doesn't matter what you acquire in life. It doesn't matter power, prestige, status, anything else. When you're dead, it's all gone. Yea, he shall see that even the wise die. Right? So, I mean, that's Psalm 1 is like, oh, the wise will live forever in the kingdom. You're kind of like, oh, and then it's like, nope, they die too. So it's a very grim kind of, almost like I said, Ecclesiastes. It's got that kind of same sense of, everything's vanity. Why? Why are you worried about this? Why are you worried about that? Just, it's all vanity. Now, there's two things you can do with that direction, right? You can become despondent and say, it's all vanity, and then go kill yourself. Actually, that's Father Stephen Freeman's blog. Most recent blog is about Dostoevsky's The Demons, and there's a character in there that decides he wants to be free, and the only way to be free because he didn't choose his life, so the only way to be free is to kill himself. Well, okay, you're right, you didn't choose your life, but your solution's probably not the right one. Just to throw that out there. But that's basically what this psalm is saying. It's saying, you think because you're wise, or because you're rich, because you're wealthy, that means something. Nope. God gave you this life, and it's going to end, and it's going to be done. There's nothing you can do about it. So even the wise men die. The fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. Your wealth isn't even your own. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they name their lands their own. When Mooresville is named after somebody, probably Moore, I would guess,
Yeah.
I bet their family's still here, but not so much, right? Man cannot abide in his pomp. He is like the beasts that perish. That's the riddle, right?
Yeah.
Man's not going to ever continue with all of his stuff. He's going to die just like cows, pigs, horses, sheep, goats. Nothing you can do, right? Animals are going to die. You're going to die. So the wisdom is working out that riddle, that you're just like a beast of the field. Well, no, I'm not. I don't have to, I'm not an ox. I don't pull a plow. Well, but you die just like they do. This is the fate of those who have foolish confidence, the end of those who are pleased with their portion. So, and by the way, this section right in here, a lot of this, not that you guys are that interested in it, but a lot of this is very obscure, and it probably is lost. So they're reconstructing. I mean, if you look at literally what these lines mean, it's like, rainbow unicorn store coffee. And they're like, ooh, how do we put that together? Not that bad. I'm exaggerating, of course. But for instance, the end of those who are pleased with their portion. Let me show you what that says. I think this is cool. You might not. Well, now I can't find it. I thought I knew where it was. All right, well, I'm not going to waste everybody's time trying to find that. But it was really interesting when I was reading it, because it was, literally it meant something about like mouths wide open, happy. And you're like, what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And so this is one way of understanding it, to the end of those who are pleased with their portion. So the death is the fate of those who have foolish confidence. Death is the fate of those who are pleased with how much they're getting at the table, those who fill their mouths. It fits. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd. Straight to the grave they descended. Now keep Psalm 23 in mind when you read that. And this guy's dark. This guy, somebody stole his Twinkie. He is just not happy. And everything is death. I don't care how rich you are. I don't care how good you are. I don't care if the Lord is your shepherd. You're still going to die. Yay. So cheerful. Like sheep they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd. Straight to the grave they descend, and their form shall waste away. Sheol shall be their home. They're all going to rot and go to death.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. But they're telling us in our leadership course, don't say but, because but negates everything that came before it, right? I say, hey, I really appreciate all the work you did, but it just completely erases everything you just said.
Yeah.
Right? Think about that though. All this stuff, it's death, 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 death. But erases all of that. God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Okay. I've got no power. My end is death. You give it, you give control to me, I'm dead. Rotten in the ground, led to like sheep to the slaughter, to Sheol, to death. Sheol is the Hebrew word for Hades. But the power of God will ransom my soul. Remember how many times he said ransom back there? Ransom, 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 ransom. You can't ransom yourself. The ransom is too expensive for you. There's no way you can afford the ransom. God can pay the ransom. And of course, we have no back of our mind the crucifixion and everything. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when one comes. Do not be afraid when one becomes rich. So now this is this whole, this thread goes to the Psalms too. I've never struggled with this consciously, but I have a feeling it's there. This sense of when you see people who have more than you. Well, I'll tell you, I know an exact example that was hard for me. When my dad was 64 when he died. Yeah, I think he was 64 when he died. So I don't do as much anymore. It's probably kind of faded. So that was 2006. That was 12 years ago. It'll actually be 13 years next month. Oh my goodness. But for a long time, if I saw like a 67-year-old who was a jerk, I'm like, really, Lord? That guy gets to live and my dad died? Let that guy die. That guy's rotten. Why does he get that? Why is he successful? Why does he have the thing? Why does he have the nice house? Why do they have the nice cars? Why do they have the good job? Why are people, everything's just handed to them. They got a golden spoon and da 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 da. This whole thing, like we really get freaked out when people are doing better than us. We don't think they deserve it. Oh, great. You sing a few songs on YouTube and now you've got $20 million. I admit that does to bug me, that all these, athletes and entertainers get paid just gazillions of dollars, anyway. Anyway, there we are. So be not afraid when you see someone become rich, when the glory of his house increases. So he's getting fame and fortune and prestige and status, and it's just heaped on him. And you're sitting there going, what's going on here? For when he dies, he will carry away nothing, right? What does Bill Gates take into the afterlife? Nothing. That guy in Mexico who's like the richest guy in the world now, what does he take? Nothing, right?
Yeah.
So when everything's done and said and panned out, whether I'm, a homeless guy living in a tent on the street, whether, I'm totally bankrupt and have, destroyed credit, or whether, I'm a gazillionaire, whatever it is, I'm leaving with nothing. So don't worry about people that seem to have worldly success. Don't worry about people that seem to have, have everything together. They're exiting this world the exact same way you are, with nothing. Which doesn't really make it any more cheerful, but still. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down with him. Though while he lives, he counts himself happy, and though a man gets praise when he does well for himself, he will go to the generations of his fathers who will never see more the light. Right? Yeah. So even though he's happy, even though he gets praise, and he says, and by the way, this is kind of shifting a little bit of the voice. One of the commentators made the argument and tried to say this was both sides of the coin. I'm not quite sure it's that strong. But he's saying, here's this rich guy who's kind of, not very righteous. Maybe he's a jerk. Maybe it's a little Ebenezer Scrooge kind of action going on. Then here's another guy that considers himself happy, and he's won the praise of men, and everybody looks up to him and thinks he's a great guy. Guess what? He will go to the generation of his fathers. What does that mean? So father's generations. Where's his dad?
In the grave.
Where's his dad's dad?
Immigrant.
Right? You're going to go rot in the ground, is what
Yeah.
they're saying. You're going to go with to your father's generations who will never more see the light because they're buried. They're planted in the ground. I don't care if people think highly of you. I don't care if you're rich. You're still going to the same spot. Man cannot abide his pomp. He is like the beasts that perish. Right? It's like I said, it's a pretty downer of a psalm.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to die.
It just ends there.
And I just think it just kind of says, you're still going to die. How brave is it? I don't know if that's the right word or not. This is what Jews read at a wake. While the guy's laying there in a casket or whatever it is,
Yeah.
they're like, you're all going to be here. Don't act like this is a big deal. Don't think, oh, wow, look at all of his. They always have those videos. They show them out, on their yacht, or they show them out with all their stuff and everything. You're like, none of it. Just you in that box. Nothing else. It's probably a good reminder.
It is a good reminder.
Maybe I'll start reading this. Excuse me, the reading is from the Psalms. But it's important because it's what value is wealth and prestige and power and fame and success, fortune, whatever you want to call it. Christ says, what good is it to gain the world and lose your soul? So as depressing as this might sound, it's a reminder, that middle verse, but God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. That's the only thing that matters in life. Everything else, like the author of Ecclesiastes says, is just vanity. It vanishes. Psalm 50. I spent longer on that than I thought I would. Psalm 50 is the first place in the Psalms that God addresses the people. So this is God's voice. And he's actually saying, hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I'll testify against you. I am God, your God. That's down there in verse 7. But the first 6 verses set up. It's kind of cool. And I didn't, I don't know how often you read the Psalms, but I've read through them a bunch of times. And I'm just reading through them to get through them. So I really am happy that we chose to do Psalms, because it's causing me to slow down and look at them. Now when I'm reading through them, I'm like, oh yeah. And there's more meaning. But this is really neat because, and you're going to see it. I thought, oh, they're reaching. And I started reading. I was like, nope, that's exactly what they're doing. This is like a cosmic court. They're setting up a courtroom drama. Like Perry Mason's going to come walking out or something. Does that date me too much, Perry Mason? Anyway.
Yeah.
But in the very first line, the mighty one God, the Lord, it actually uses El Elyon and then the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, right? So it basically loads up all three, the Trinity of his names, the Old Testament. It loads them right on up. So it's very formal from the beginning. And what it's doing is it's setting up a court case. So you're actually coming before the judge, and the judge being, of course, God. But it's a courtroom drama. The mighty one, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of the sun to its setting. Everybody, east to the west, out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. So God's in Zion, calling everybody to him because he's about to make some judgment. Our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire, round about him a mighty tempest. He calls the heavens above and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather to me, my faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declares righteousness, for God himself is judge. Right?
Yeah.
Bring me my people. They made sacrifices. That means, it's like when you go on the internet now and it says, click here, because we're going to use cookies and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
But if you don't click here, we're going to have this banner that blocks half your view. So you got to click here. And if you click there, then, but anyway, it's like, hey, you sacrifice to me. That means you sign the disclaimer. You accept the end user agreement, right? You're in covenant now. And now we're going to talk about your end of the bargain. And by the way, who's going to be the judge? That would be me, right? God is the judge, and he's judging all of the peoples according to the covenant. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. So the first thing he's going to judge is their worship. He's going to judge their behavior. I am God, your God. I do not reprove you for your sacrifices. It's not, you sacrifice, it's okay, you do sacrifices. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. So you bring all these offerings. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I will accept no bull from your house, nor he-goat from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine. The cattle on 1,000 hills, I know all the birds of the air, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and all that is in it is mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and pay your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. So the problem is not that they make sacrifices. It's that they've forgotten that everything they make a sacrifice of already belonged to God. This is a great stewardship psalm.
Yeah.
I will judge you. I don't mind that you're bringing your stewardship to church, but you think you're actually doing us a favor, right? That's what he's saying. You're bringing this stuff to me and you think you're doing a good deed? No, that was all mine in the first place. And I gave it to you and asked you to return some of it to me just so you didn't forget. But you forgot. So I don't care about your sacrifices. I don't care that you bring me bulls or blood of he-goats or whatever it says in there, which is just gross, talking about drinking blood of goats. And I told you, but when I went to Africa, though, that's like the honor because that's all the all the nutrients that are there and the moisture that's there because they don't even have water. So the person who gets to drink the blood of the goat is very honored. I said no. They invited me, and I said no. I mean, they literally they cut them open and it pools in there, and they stick their head in the carcass and drink the blood out. And I'm kind of going, yeah, I'm all about cultural openness and everything, but no, I'll get my beard and it's gross. I'm not gonna do it. I will deliver and you shall glorify me. So the first thing is improper worship. And it's not that the actual activities of worship are wrong. It's that they're being given with the wrong interdisposition. It's not a recognition that God owns all things. Ooh, we're going to make it.
Say thine own of thine own.
Thine own of thine own. Yeah, we offer to you. But to the wicked, God says, now a lot of people say, oh, he's shifting. These were the faithful, your worship is bad. Now to the wicked, your behavior is bad. He's not changing audience here. He's just saying he's calling them wicked. Okay, but to the wicked, God says, what right have you to recite my statutes or take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you're a friend of his, and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I've been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself, but now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you. Okay, you had a wrong view of God. You thought he would be, oh yeah, look there, And by the way, this is the same thing. Be careful who you surround yourself with. You saw a thief, and you hung out with him. Just go the other way. Turn the other cheek. Just go. Don't hang out with him. But you're hanging out with the wrong people. You hate discipline. You cast my words behind you. I've given you the statutes. You've forgotten them. You've got my covenant on your lips, but you decide to give your mouth free rein for evil. You're just not behaving the way you should. So it's a judgment of their conduct and behavior. Mark this then, you who forget God. So now there's a big old threat of punishment. Lest I rend and there be none to deliver, unless I shred you into pieces and there's nothing left to pick up. But then it's leading towards, that's not the message of the psalm. It sounds harsh. Right. It's not, we'll end there. Okay. See you next week. He who brings thanksgiving as his sacrifice honors me. To him who orders his way aright, I will show the salvation of God. So how do you correct wrong worship? Bring thanksgiving as a sacrifice. That's right worship. How do you correct wrong conduct? Well, you order your way aright according to the commandments of God. So even though it's this big long thing of this kind of diatribe of God against Israel and all of humanity, saying you guys just are messing this up, the end of the psalm is this is how you fix it. Just do the right thing. Just offer a worship of thanksgiving and or sacrifice of thanksgiving, sacrifice of praise, right?
Yeah.
A sacrifice of thanksgiving and order your way right. That's all you got to do. Nothing more to it. And that brings us to the end of Psalm 50. So next week we will do Psalm 51. Septuagint numbering, Psalm 50. That's how I always think of it because we always say the 50th Psalm. And we'll spend pretty much the whole class on Psalm 51. And that should get us there. I will pause a little bit for any kind of questions that might roll up. Do you have any questions?
I'm gonna see if Bill had any or Maureen.
Bill's not going to be mad at me because he hates angry psalms. I don't know. I shouldn't talk about you when you're not. We're sitting right here. But they're hard, and I think one of the things that makes them so hard is we want to imagine that they can't possibly apply to us. I'm not that bad. I haven't killed him. But by the way, I mean, Randall, we're done. So if you want to leave, we're just going to have our prayer in just a second, and then we'll be done. But did you read about that guy in Canada that didn't see the bus coming to an intersection, and he slammed into it and killed 16 and injured 13 others?
Yeah.
And they brought him into court on 16 counts of dangerous driving, which led to a death, and then 13 counts of dangerous driving that led to injury. And his lawyer's like, do you want to plead? We get a plea bargain. What do you want to do? He said, no, I'm going to plead guilty. He said, I'm not drawing this out anymore. There's no reason any of those people should suffer. I don't want you to plea bargain. I don't want anything else. We're just going to go and plead guilty.
Yeah, there you go. Wow.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, that is unbelievable.
I was like, wow. You talk about like a lamb of the slaughter. I mean, he's just saying, no, I'm guilty. Because I did. I ran that stop sign and I slammed into him, and I'm responsible, and I'm not going to make anybody in that family suffer anymore by pretending that there's some good excuse for it.
Yeah.
And apparently some of the families have reached out to him and offered him forgiveness and kindness and all this other stuff. And he's like, I'm just overwhelmed that in their grief they would care about.
Wow.
But apparently there's been a bunch of accidents, even fatal accidents at that intersection. They just haven't fixed it. So it's kind of like, But anyway, I don't know why I thought of that. But why did I think of that? Oh, because we don't want to think we do anything wrong. And what do we want to do is that guy, we want to forgive him, right? We want to say, hey, no big deal. But he killed 16 people through his negligence. But anyway, I think my brain is just about done. I'm sorry if that was all over the place. I don't see any questions popping up. Oh, I see Patty. What was the psalmist's idea of hell? They only recognize Hades. Probably, yeah, just Sheol. They didn't have an idea of punishment so much as they did have an idea of imprisonment. So Sheol was a place that we went at death and were trapped there. There's this idea of the bosom of Abraham. You remember that from the story of Lazarus and the rich man. That's kind of at the front of Sheol. That's kind of like the good place before it gets really dark. But there's not a really hugely developed Jewish idea of the afterlife, the kingdom. They didn't even know if it was a place or if it was a state or something like that. But Sheol was never a good thing. There wasn't like a heaven and a hell. There wasn't like a good afterlife. It was always just this sense of imprisonment and loneliness, I guess, to a degree. So yeah, Sheol, going down to Sheol was not good. That's why they say, why would you send me to Sheol? I can't praise you anymore. I can't offer you worship if you send me to Sheol. So you have to save my life. Otherwise, nobody's going to be praising you on earth. So you have to take care of that. But anyway.
When they said save my life, is it an earthly save or the next life save?
Mostly it's an earthly, yeah. Like Jewish is very embodied and very concrete Jewish theological thinking. So that's why Robert Alter always translated as Lord of my rescue, because we've loaded so much onto salvation. If we say, Lord, save me, we think, oh, grant me eternal life in heaven. But no, most of the Psalms, when they say save me, they mean don't let me fall off this edge of this cliff. It's a very embodied kind of thing. But anyway, so we dragged on a little bit. Good night, everybody. God bless you. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week, unless I send you an email otherwise. But I'm pretty sure I don't have anything coming up next week. Hope everybody's having a blessed theophany. Hope you're getting your house blessed. And I will see you soon. God bless you all. O holy apostle and evangelist Luke, make intercessions to our merciful God, that he grant our souls remission of offenses. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, please watch over these, your servants, protect them as they go to their homes. Watch over all those who have joined us over the internet. And Lord, help us to trust that your providence orders all things, and that we aren't in control and we don't need to be in control. Let us loosen our grasp on the reins of life and accept your mercy and your love as we travel towards your kingdom. For your holy name, forever in the ages of ages. Amen, amen, amen. Okay. God bless you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.